One of the things that's not fun is to have a health issue and not have the tools to deal with it. I keep reading stories about how it's so hard to get in to see a doctor. My sister has an issue with her arm, her hand, and the doctor said, "You have got to have surgery or you're going to lose your hand," carpal tunnel syndrome thing. And he says, this was in October. He says, "I don't have any openings until April, but you need to do it right away." Well, then she get into the clutches of the insurance agencies and the states, the doctors. And believe it or not, she finally got an appointment yesterday. It only took, what, 6 months? I suppose that's counted good in some cases. Insurance companies are doing everything they can not to pay for claims. Uh, so what we want to do is talk about some of the things that we can do, we should do, and in the case of our guest, some things that have happened that may be instructive. So when you're 20 years old, you don't think you need insurance. Maybe your company gives you some. They used to do it almost all the time. Now it's sort of not as frequent unless the company's a little bit bigger. But as you grow older, not only do you need the insurance just for the basic things, but also for the opportunity to have your blood pressure checked, to have your heart checked. All too often, you find that people get overweight, okay, and their blood pressure skyrockets. They don't know, and it could be very damaging to you. You could anything from having a stroke or a heart attack to blowing a retina out of your eyeball. So these are things you want to do. And as much as you hate going to a doctor or a dentist, this is something that should be planned into everyone's activities. Now, as we get older, it becomes a little more critical. And there are those who start to have issues, everything ranging from arthritis to hearing issues. And one of the things that I find very interesting is how the over-the-counter hearing aid business has changed in the past year. So we want to talk about that a little bit, perhaps, because there are some positive things and some negative things that you need to be aware of if you go that route. I'd like to start maybe with the worst case scenario. You don't feel good. You go to the doctor and you get this diagnosis, prostate cancer. Mary, this doesn't apply to you, but we know you'll listen.
Actually, it might.
Yeah? Talk to us. This is Cowboy Kurt Flick, longtime broadcast engineer, tower climber, rigger, programmer, all around
welder, plasterer, beef cook, bottle washer.
And you were diagnosed, what did you say, 10 years ago?
No, year and a half.
So you took it and you did
At this point, it was the fall of 23. A couple of years ago, 3 or 4, there's a group that comes to town every now and again called Lifeline Screening. And they're one of these, maybe they're a scam, maybe they're not. It's a couple of $100 and they'll run your blood pressure and your cholesterol and check your circulation and a number of those things. And it came to town and I thought, yeah, what the heck? You know, I can't afford to go see a doctor with Obamacare. It's just way too expensive. I went and got a Lifeline Screening. And while I was getting that, and they said, by the way, we can throw in a PSA test for $20. I thought, $20, sure, why not? What's it going to hurt? And I got the PSA test for $20. At my age, well into my 60s at the time, they like to say that a PSA below 4 is fine. If you're in your 40s, it should be below 1. But if you're in your 60s, below 4 is fine. There's not much to worry about. If it goes above that, you might want to consider some follow-up. Mine, of course, from Lifeline came in at 4.1. I took that to my general practitioner, and he looked at it and said, well, after he and I have discussed a number of other things, blood pressure and what have you, he's gotten to know me. He said the right thing. He said, we're going to check the data. We're going to get another test, because one data point tells us nothing. A handful of data points that all say the same thing, now you've got something. So he drew some more blood and sent in and ran an independent PSA test, and it came back at like 4.2, suggesting it's a real number. Then I got the letter from Lifeline saying our procedure was flawed and don't use our numbers. So it's still $20 well spent. It's got what got me started. There were no symptoms, none, zero, zilch, nada. One thing led to another. I ended up getting biopsy and was diagnosed with acinar adenosarcoma of the prostate. Adenosarcoma is a glandular cancer, kind of like breasts are glands. So yes, the same cancer can show up as breast cancer in women. In the prostate, it's typically a very slow growing cancer, typically. Of course, my attitude was, why give it a chance to metastasize? And what's the best thing for me to do? So I went and started investigating therapies. I'm finding out most people go to their doctor says cancer. As you might guess, so when you hear that word, it's like getting hit in the back of the head with a 2x4. It's just absolutely stunning. I sat in one spot and didn't move or talk or breathe or do much of anything for a couple of hours while I digested the reality of this. It's not a death sentence, though, not necessarily, if you respond correctly. Followed that up with, okay, what is the correct response? And started researching options. And there are a number of things that can be done. Most guys, their doctor says, well, you need radiation, they go get radiation. Or he says, well, you need surgery, and they go get surgery. And my position on that was, what's the collateral damage? What are my choices, and what is the collateral damage? I want to minimize the collateral damage. Yes, I want to get rid of the cancer, but I don't want to cure the disease by killing the patient. And they tell me things like, well, the radical prostatectomy that we do, you're of course going to be incontinent for quite some time, maybe in a year and a half or 2 years, you might get some control back. If things go one way, you might be anally incompetent, be in adult diapers for a year or 10. Really? Talk to me about this death option again. I really don't want to live in adult diapers for the rest of my life, no matter how long it is. I didn't like that plan. So, well, what about radiation? Well, we don't recommend that because we're surgeons. Okay, this begins a trend. Well, I got a referral to the radiation girl and went and talked to her. And of course, the radiation people don't recommend surgery. Surprise. And she explained all to me how they're going to do tattoos, and the machine flies around and shoots with a beam they call photon radiation. I had to come home and call my friend Kevin Gallett, say, Kevin, what is photon radiation? Since Kevin's an X-ray crystallographer, he knows about these kinds of things. He says, well, that's a kind of a generic term they use for X-ray, gamma ray, electron beam, cosmic ray. It's a whole mishmash of ionizing radiation. Okay? Because I had asked her, what about alpha radiation? And she said she doesn't know what that is. She thinks I'm talking about proton radiation. No, but tell me about that. Well, we don't do that, but we think university hospitals does. Call university hospital. They have a scatter beam, which is not applicable. So what I found out with proton radiation, the advantage of proton is the Bragg peak. The standard photon radiation is an ionizing beam that they shoot at you from several different angles, all of them to converge, ideally, on the cancer in your prostate gland. Well, as long as you're not breathing and things don't move, that's feasible. But if you are breathing, and or your heart's beating and things move just a little bit, you can end up with some rather large doses of radiation going in places that you don't really want it, and collateral damage. The big problem is that entire region will turn into one large, huge ball of scar tissue. So that if the radiation is not successful and you later need surgery, it becomes a much, much more difficult procedure. Okay, so they talk to her about that. She gets to the point, says, do you have any questions? Well, me being me, yes, I do. I'm asking about photon or the alpha particle. She doesn't know what that is. I'm asking about the photon. I'm asking about what is photon. I'm a number of questions. She stops me after about 15 minutes and says, let me ask you, what kind of engineer are you? And I said, I didn't tell you I was an engineer. Well, no, you didn't, but by the questions you're asking, you're an engineer. It was kind of enjoyable. Left there with some more questions. Some of the questions I had were, what about cryosurgery? Well, they don't do that. Okay, what about hormone therapy? Well, they don't do that. What about direct injection chemotherapy? Well, they don't do that. So there's a whole lot of, we offer one from column A and one from column B, choose. By the time I got done with my research, I had 17 different potential therapies to treat my type of cancer. The one I was most interested in was high intensity focused ultrasound. Ultrasound around 1 megahertz. It's called sound because it's transmitted mechanically rather than through electromagnetic radiation. Okay, focus. Well, it's there are two types. There's the phased array and the I forget the other one. They can take a couple of milliwatt transducer and give you 100 kilowatts worth of focused energy in a 2 or 3 atom space, which, as you might imagine, could burn a lot of tissue. The idea being to burn out the cancer and leave the rest of the tissue intact. And they said, well, you're not a candidate for that because your cancer is too close to a sphincter and we're afraid of damaging this, so we're not going to do it. Okay. I'm getting real tired of hearing what they won't do. But I'll take it to our tumor board and let them make the final decision. Okay. That came back with, we're not going to do the focused ultrasound, but would you be interested in a partial prostatectomy? Well, when I had talked to the first surgeon and I asked, what about a partial? And he said, well, it just isn't done. Nobody does that. That's not an option. Now I'm being told, would you be interested in this option? Well, hell yes, I will. Refer me to that. And I ended up speaking with Dr. Jihad Kayuk at the Cleveland Clinic. The two best hospitals in the world for treating this type of cancer are, one, the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and number two, the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio, about 40 miles from me. So coincidentally, and if you go pull down my video, I start by saying, thank God that I got prostate cancer. At this point in history, at this geography, at my age, a lot of things that made it a really good thing. And when you start talking to me about things like experimental and trial, you got my attention. I am interested. So the partial prostatectomy, being pioneered by Dr. Jihad Kayuk at the Cleveland Clinic, I ended up being patient number 25 in all of history and all of the world to get this procedure. I got it for a handful of reasons. The minimal collateral damage, close to none. I still have my prostate and I'm still fully functional. I was not incontinent at all, not even part of a day, which came with every other possible treatment, from what I was told. In the event cancer returns, and I fully expect that it will, all of the other treatment options remain available to me. The thing was, and one of the options that was offered to me early on was what they like to call active surveillance. And I said, so you mean do nothing? Well, no. That's not what we, what we mean is that we're going to watch it. And I said, and do nothing. Well, no, we're going to watch it and keep an eye on it and wait for it to get worse. Why do I want to wait for it to get worse? You know, I've got a bad thing here that needs to go away. Let's take care of it. Sit around, wait for it to get worse. Besides, I already have a death wish, and it's not to die of cancer. Now, I personally, some people say, what causes cancer? Well, I personally believe if you go bald or you turn gray, you're a candidate for cancer. Cancer is just a mutation in normal cells that's gone in a bad direction that the immune system can't deal with, just like gray hair. So it's my personal belief that if we live long enough, we're all going to get cancer. My objective is to get it when I'm 160 years old. And I have a good reason for that. I have a death wish. I plan to be shot by a jealous lover when I'm 140. So, and the whole point of active surveillance is that something else will kill you before the cancer does. And they told me, said, well, you know, if you were 75 years old, already had 2 heart attacks, that would be the obvious choice, because prostate cancer typically advances slow enough, something else is going to kill you first. But because you're still relatively young, you're you know, at the time I was 69, 68, and otherwise in really good health, there was a real good chance that the cancer untreated would get me first. But I didn't have to treat it. In my cancer support group, where I did the presentation that is the video that I put up. Last month, we had a guy remind us all, because he said, how many of you are doing active surveillance? And about half the room raised their hand. Why? And the general consensus was their sex life. That everything, the surgery and the radiation tends to destroy your sex life. And he just turned around and looked at the room and said, well, you know, dead people don't have sex, which puts a different perspective on things for some of us. In my case, with the partial, I'm still fully functional. It was not really in the 6 months prior, or 4 months or whatever it was, the other 17 possible regimes that I investigated, I had already pretty much come to terms with the idea that my sex life was over. So when they said this procedure promised, one of the promises was that you could maintain a sex life, I didn't really care. I'd already come to terms with it, and they were all shocked. Well, I was more interested in the experimental aspect and being able to contribute to future generations and the guys that come behind me. That you don't have to lose your entire prostate. You don't have to get radiated to where you get into anal incontinence. You don't have to go through some of the misery that has traditionally gone along with treating prostate cancer. There is another option. It's not widely known. It's not well publicized. There are, and Dr. Kayuk has written a number of papers on the partial prostatectomy that you can find on the New England Journal of Medicine's website. You can find it on the National Institute of Health's website. They told me, well, you can find it on the Cleveland Clinic website. Well, no, you can't. You can find a blurb advertising that we do it, but nothing else. So my point to anybody that'll listen is do your research. You must participate in your own recovery. You must participate in your own survival. Don't trust any government to do it for you. They're not going to. Don't trust what the first thing the doctors tell you. Find out what your options are and do your own research, make your own decision. The worst part of this entire experience for me actually was fighting with Medicare, because it is a new procedure. Is this covered? Well, we can't tell you that. Well, why can't you tell me? HIPAA laws, privacy laws. Can you tell me if any of the previous 24 patients that got this were covered? Nope, privacy laws. Wasn't this just lovely? The worst part was fighting with Medicare. I'm patient number 25 for the procedure, by the way, in all the world, in all of history. I ended up calling Medicare myself. They said, well, you got to have the procedure number. Call back to the Cleveland Clinic, get the procedure number. call back to Medicare. It's procedure 55866. And the girl says, let me look that up. Wait a minute. She comes back and says, oh, yeah, that's transgendered care for a transsexual surgical. No, it's not. It's prostate cancer. But, okay, let's assume I got the procedure number wrong, but you have it somewhere. How much is Medicare going to cover this? She said, well, sir, it has to be medically necessary. I said, cancer? Don't you think treating cancer is medically necessary? And she said, you don't understand, sir. It has to be medically necessary. Well, cancer treatment, that's the practice of medicine. Don't you think that's medically necessary? She said, sir, you still don't understand. It has to be medically necessary. And I said, how many times are you going to tell me the same two damn words and not tell me anything? And the girl said, is there anything else I can help you with today? Obviously not. After going through all of that, I finally did get a hold of a sympathetic patient advocate at the Cleveland Clinic who said, look, just go ahead and schedule the surgery. They're not going to wheel you into the operating room if they don't know how they're getting paid. And if Medicare is not going to cover it, they're not going to do it. So I scheduled the surgery. The bill came in at $135,000 and some odd change for the procedure. That did not include the MRI leading up to it or the MRI that I had last week as a follow-up, did not include the biopsy, a number of other things. By the time, and one of the reasons I love my Medicare supplement, my friend Sue sold it to me, get a hold of me else, and I'll pass it on if you want it. The supplement that she sold me, if Medicare covers any part of it, my supplement covers whatever's left after the deductible. So by the time it was all said and done, it cost me about $1,800 out of pocket. I can do that. I did that. I'm happy with it. My MRI last week shows that I'm cancer-free. Now, every time I heard someone say I'm cancer-free, they were dead within 2 or 3 months. So I'm reluctant to say that, but nothing is showing up. And I've got a conference about that tomorrow as a medical follow-up. One of the things I liked about this procedure that was offered to me was that because it's new, because it's trial, because I'm number 25, they want to follow me around for the rest of my life and test me every 3 months for cancer. I like this a lot. If it does come up again, and I believe it will, we're going to know it real quick. 2 or 3 people have dropped out of the program because they don't want to be bothered getting checked every 3 months. Another 2 or 3 people went back and got the full prostatectomy. They were not comfortable with the idea that I still have a prostate that already developed cancer once, and it's probably going to do it again at some point. Some people are just not comfortable with that. I am. I don't care, especially knowing that we're going to catch it early. The trick is catch it early, do your research, know what's out there, know what's available. Somebody mentioned on Barry's list the cyber knife. I had heard something referred to as a cyber knife, but there's actually a product out there who's copyrighted the brand name cyber knife, which is an artificial intelligent, AI-controlled external radiation machine that hits you with about 800 beams, as opposed to the half a dozen or so the conventional office thing does, controlled by the AI computer. So it can compensate for your breathing. It can compensate for your heartbeat. So that as things internally move, it can keep the focus on the tumor and the tumor alone. Had I known about this before I got what I got, I might have gone that way. Turns out the most information on that is on a website for CyberKnife Miami. CyberKnife Inc. doesn't have a lot on their website. I found out St. Mary's, just down the road from me in the other direction, has one. There's nothing on their website at all. So it's another one of those things that you can't passively sit and just say, well, this is what the doctor said I got to do. No, you have to investigate. You have to find out what's there and do it. And I did a little brief presentation. This is a very brief, abbreviated version of the video. If you all go, I put up the Facebook link and go watch that video. And then I did what I want to do now. It's basically open the floor to questions and see if you can get my mind working where you want it to be. Barry?
Did you, Kurt, did you have any family history of prostate cancer that you know of?
I did not know that I have history of prostate cancer on both sides of my family. My father's father got brachytherapy, which is a direction I was going to go. That's the implanted brachytherapy is internal radiation. They were going to implant seeds into my prostate.
Right.
That's the direction I was considering. Turns out my grandfather on my father's side got brachytherapy, but he fell out of bed, the incisions split open, and he died from complications. Turns out my uncle on my mother's side got brachytherapy and lived 18 years cancer-free afterwards. So yes, there was a history of prostate cancer on both sides. My father died at the age of 57 from what they told us was bladder cancer, but nobody's really sure that it didn't start as prostate cancer, and he ignored it.
Yeah, my dad.
So yes, there is a history.
Yeah, my dad had prostate, and it eventually he did get bladder cancer, and that was after they took his prostate out. Of course, this was long time ago when technology wasn't what it is today. Of course,
3.5 years ago, my procedure was not available at all.
Right.
This procedure is new. So yeah, the rate at which medicine is advancing is astounding in some areas.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Mark, you mentioned that you'd had it twice.
Yes. Back in 2012, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Had been going and getting PSA tests once a year prior to that, due to the fact that my dad had prostate cancer and there were other cancer members of my family that had different cancers. So it was something my dad had told me. He said, watch it close. And so back in 12, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The doctor I saw the first time around wasn't really doing too much about it. At least we didn't feel that he was. Had 2 different biopsies. After the second biopsy, he says, well, you got a little cancer in there, but I don't think it's a big problem. Didn't like what we heard. We wanted to see a different doctor. You know, it doesn't hurt to get a second opinion. If you're not comfortable with what the first doctor has told you, by all means, go see another one. It's
I kind of get the impression from what Cowboy is saying is that you should get more than one opinion.
Oh, you should.
I got probably a dozen. I talked to probably a dozen physicians. At least 3 about brachytherapy, at least 3 about surgery, 3 about radiation, 1 or 2 about the focused ultrasound, at least 1 about cryosurgery. Yeah, I talked to a lot of people, and
did you find it easy to get?
There was a question
doctors?
for a while. Medicare.
Did you find? Did you find it easy to get to all those doctors?
Yes, that was rather well. I have a relationship with my personal physician, wherein a number of years ago, when he wanted to start me on medication for high blood pressure, and he said, "We're going to put you on," and I said, "No, we're not." You know, 1 blood pressure check in the office. Yes, it was high. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was like 170 over 130 or something really high. So we need to get you on medication. No, we're not. What I'm going to do is I have a blood pressure machine at home. We're going to go home. I'm going to take my own blood pressure 3 or 4 times a day for a month. And then I'm going to come back with the data, and then we'll decide. And I did that. And on average, my blood pressure was 123 over 78 or something perfectly normal on average. So he had learned that Kurt's not going to jump into anything ill-informed. And Kurt is going to gather data And if Kurt's saying he doesn't want to do this or he does want to do that, there's probably a reason for it. And when I said, Jeff, I want a reference to somebody in the Cleveland Clinic to talk about brachytherapy or the focused ultrasound, because the SUMA group doesn't do it. I don't even have to talk to them anymore. I send them an email and I get the referral. So
Well,
I found it very easy.
well, that's interesting because that's not always the case. There are a lot of doctors that will get very upset if you do not accept their first response.
At one time, a long time ago, I was married, and my oldest boy was my wife at the time was pregnant with my oldest boy, and her OBGYN said something about we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And me being me said, yeah, okay, fine, but tell me why. And he made the fatal mistake of saying, because I'm the doctor, that's why. And I said to him, yes, you are. That's why I hired you. And now your ass is fired. And he was absolutely shocked. And I found out, yes, a lot of doctors have a God complex, but there are quite a few good people in the medical profession as well. And it's not real hard to find them. You just have to make the effort.
Yeah, Sherry, my sister, had mentioned that the nicer they were to her, the less competent they turned out to be. The ruder they were, the better they were. That's sort of a strange corollary. Mark, did you have trouble finding the right solution for yourself?
No. The second one that we saw, was really on top of things and did her due diligence. She looked at all the results of the biopsies and, looking at all the PSA numbers and so on. And uh, she come up with they had a new procedure that had just come out using a CT scanner, that they could actually do the scan on you. What they would do is they would inject a radioactive particle or whatever into your bloodstream, and then they would do a CT scan, and they would actually see where the cancer cells were. She says it'll light up like light bulbs, and um, when they did that, they found that my prostate was just loaded with cancer cells. And she says, my best suggestion is we take it out. And uh, let's see, I was 53 at the time. And I said, we're done having kids. So, um, I'm fine with that. And I did ask, of course, if there were um, other options. And of course, she mentioned a few of them that Kurt was talking about. The one with the radioactive seeds, that they inject, if they don't work, I found out they cannot go back. They can't go in and do surgery after that because that's considered a hazardous material, and they're
That's
not
not
equipped to
true.
remove something like that. So,
Yeah,
uh,
that's not true.
that's not true. Okay.
No,
Well,
it may have been at one time, but it's not anymore. And
okay.
it does depend on the antidote.
I see.
Well, that's the
Uh,
point that I'd like to really get to is there have been changes. 40 years ago, you had an operation or an accident, and the first thing the doctor pulled was a pint of blood. And this was coming out of World War II, and a lot of doctors were trained that way. And the more we've learned over the years, it's blood volume. It's the volume in your veins, not the blood itself. And you're better off in many cases not to have blood because of rejection and things like that. I've personally learned of people who've had a blood count of zero point 0.8 and were used volume expanders and survived. Now, today, there are bloodless surgeries around many hospitals that cater to people with aversion to blood or religious issues. As a matter of fact, when you go to a hospital, it used to be that you would have to sign a waiver if you didn't take blood. Now you sign a waiver if you do take blood. And that's because they consider it very dangerous medicine. So things have changed. Same thing here with cancer treatment. Uh, Johnny, I don't know if your microphone works or not, but you mentioned in your chat thing here that you had a PSA of 3.74. And are you willing to tell us something here?
Well, that's what it was. Back in December, I got it at, I had several tests and we had a graph that showed when it started and from below 1 up to 374. And then he sent me to the urologist. And so I've had all the tests done. And Monday I get to go over and get calibrated, and we're going to do radiation.
So you're really interested in Kurt and Mark's experience.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been listening, and in fact, I'll go back when you post this thing and take a few notes that I may take over on Monday to ask a few questions. But I did have the test that Mark was talking about, and they call it a PSMA,
Yep.
and that's where they injected you and ran you through the CT scanner, and it did a little bit more than that, but it showed that I was contained. It was not anywhere outside of the prostate. So that's kind of my
That's important.
story
That's-
there.
Any
That's-
questions that you'd like to ask Mark or Kurt?
Well, no, I think I've heard a lot here. Actually, my wife is an RN. She's retired. I'm retired broadcast engineer. And she goes with me and she asks all the questions.
That's good. That's good.
It's good. When well, I ended up having the prostate removed, and everything was good after that. But 10 years later, my PSA number started to go up again, and got up into that area of, well, we better check a little deeper here. They did run the tests again and found that I had some cancer cells in a few of my lymph nodes. Apparently, when they removed the prostate, some of the cells got away, and they were dormant for 10 years. So then on the second round is where I did the radiation. It wasn't bad. It definitely wears you out. I kept working even though my energy was real low. Well, it was real low because they had me on hormone therapy. Testosterone is what feeds the cancer cells in the prostate. And if they lower your testosterone, then the cancer cells aren't as active. I mean, they're there, but they don't move a lot to metastasize in other places. So went through a couple months of radiation treatments. Just saw my oncologist last week, and he said everything looks great. We're going to kick it up from 6 months to a year now for checkups. So
That's good. That's good.
How many radiation treatments?
I did. It was Monday through Friday,
Right.
7:30 in the morning. It was always the first one there, and so they could get me in. It took about 15 minutes, and then that was it. The weekends you didn't do it, and then of course we had a few holidays in there that we had to deal with. That they kind of moved things around, but yeah, 2 months, November and December of 23 is when I had my radiation treatments.
Yeah, they scheduled me for, I had people that tell me they were in the 20s, but mine is considered high risk, so I'm at 40.
Okay. Well, and they considered me high risk because of the fact that I'm also diabetic. So, things kind of change when you got other health issues
That's for
that you're
sure.
dealing with that, so things kind of change. Now with the radiation, for me, they actually had me come in before we actually started the sessions and do what they called a mock-up session. And this is where they actually kind of fitted you for a device that it was a deal you kind of laid in and it was molded to your lower body so that it kept it perfectly still. And if there were places that they didn't want the radiation to hit, then of course they would mold a cover, a shield, if you will, to protect those areas. Although my oncologist told me, he said the beams, radiation therapy now compared to what it used to be um, 10, 15 years ago is, I mean, they're more precise now with hitting that beam right where it needs to go.
Well,
Yeah,
they put
if you didn't care, you could become a highway trooper and have the radar gun between your legs.
Right?
they put three little beads of I don't know, gold, I think they called it, in me for their calibration.
Oh, okay.
So that's what they use to precisely aim the beam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to turn our attention a little bit more for a moment toward skin cancer because we have a couple of folks with that issue that are with us, and I'd like to mention before my mother had a little thing in the corner of her eye, and she was 97, and the eye doctor said, "Well, that's cancerous," and the only thing we can do is operate and dig it out and sew the eye shut for 3 months. Now, my mother didn't have a sight in her left eye, uh, and so that would make her essentially blind for that period of time. And I'd just like to use this opportunity to reinforce what we've been discussing. We went to another doctor, and this doctor took us to the university, uh, Banner University Hospital here, and the doctor used radiation on her eye, 10 treatments over a span of 2 weeks, and it all went away. There was no surgery. There was no discomfort other than for an old lady who was partially into dementia and having to keep her calm. But as Mark just said, the radiation was very pointed and directed. It went right there, took care of it, had no other side effects, which I thought was good. Skin cancer.
You happen to know, was it photon or proton radiation? Do you happen to know?
No, I'm sorry, I do not know.
The reason I investigated proton radiation is the Bragg peak. Proton radiation actually is actual particles. The photon radiation with the X-rays, gamma rays, electron beams are bombarding you with essentially photons the size of an electron. And if we know anything about atomic structure, it's kind of like throwing a basketball through the solar system. You throw enough of them, and a few of them are going to hit the tumor, and the rest are going to pass through and do nothing, that sort of thing. But nothing's going to stop them. They just continue all the way through, and everything gets radiated. Proton radiation is actual particle beam. The advantage of this is that by controlling the acceleration in the particle accelerometer, they can control the depth into the tissue that it penetrates, so that the proton hit hard and fast at the surface, but they stop in the tumor, which is where they're the most toxic and is where you want it to be the most toxic. I can see in your mother's case, if it was proton radiation, they can set that up to hit the tumor and not hit the eyeball. Photon radiation, I would question. And that's the only reason I posed that question.
Well, if she were still alive or going through it, I would ask. Now I know the question. Unfortunately, she did pass away at 98 and not with us now. So, um, Mark, Philly, you mentioned that your skin cancer was using a photodynamic therapy, yes?
Yeah, actually, I loaded from my dermatologist website uh, the treatments that I'm getting there. And one is the focused electronic brachytherapy. Okay. And I think it's X-ray. It's got a little generator and it's got some cooling hoses on it. That thing must run hot. And then it's put down a pipe that is focused. And I just had it on my cheek, and I had it before on my hand, and it just is wonderful. And it's about 10 applications, and it's in lieu of surgery. I've had some other skin cancers where I had Mohs surgery done. Have you ever heard of that? This Dr. Moe, this goes back to the 1930s, and it's kind of like a cheese slicer, and they put it under the microscope until they've got through it, and that you have to have a Band-Aid on for a while, and this is all in lieu of that. So here I'm in a retirement community in Walnut Creek, California, and the badge of honor is Mohs surgery Band-Aids. But as this equipment becomes more and more available, this is preferred. It's a lot more expensive, but I'm in my 10th year now of Medicare, and I've never been treated better by any insurance plan. I have a supplement. I'm not using the Advantage plan. I've got friends where they will not cover this on the Advantage plan, which is an HMO like Kaiser, the big popular one here. But I've just got regular Medicare with a supplement. Also, matter of fact, I just did this yesterday on my face, what's called photodynamic therapy, where they put this very expensive salve on you, and then you sit under a blue light for about a half hour. And I've also done in years gone by some sort of cream that will do the same thing. You got to apply it yourself over a period of like 6 weeks. This is just one visit and you're out. And so that's what it's called, the photodynamic treatment.
Mark, you mentioned 10 times with the radiation, and I think I heard Mark and Kurt, did you say 10? I keep hearing the word 10.
Well, I think I did 13 this time, and it's for a minute and a half. And luckily, this guy used to be 10 miles away down in Blackhawk, but they actually set up some equipment for both of these here locally. It's like a mile from me now. So it's no big deal. But it is multiple applications, and as far as I can tell, it's just taking care of it beautifully.
So is this like the old thing with rabies treatments? You took 10, or an antibiotic that you do it for 10 days, and that they feel they get it, but they just keep doing it to make sure they got it.
Well, I suppose this is pretty regulated. Obviously, insurance likes it, so I hope they have their act together. This guy says MD after his name. They also had me do a FaceTime with a guy in San Diego who's specialist in this, and they have to talk to you and tell you a few things, and I just say yes, 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 and I'm very pleased with it.
What they're doing is they have a pretty good idea. They know how many mega electron volts it's going to take to destroy a tumor that occupies so much volume. And whether it's 20 mega electron volts or 25 mega electron volts, and they need to apply that amount of energy to the tumor to destroy it. There are two ways to do it. One is with the high dose therapy, which is typically 4 or 5 treatments at very high dose, and you burn and exhaustion, etc. The typical is to divide it out over 28 applications spread out over a month, not including weekends. And that's done to allow the body to recover the areas that are not supposed to get radiated that do, to allow them to recover rather than throwing 20 mega electron volts at you and burning out an area the size of a baseball that's going to take months and months and months to heal from. It's an attempt to mitigate some of the collateral damage.
Well, this is very focused. It's pointed right at where they did the biopsy. Mm-hmm. And the one on my hand
can do it. They can do it in one shot.
Yeah, this is skin cancer, not tumor cancer.
Yeah. It's going to take X number of electron volts to obliterate a volume
Mm-hmm.
of that the cancer occupies. I can equate it to how long do you put your coffee cup in the microwave? Well, it depends how much coffee's in it. It's gonna, and you can do it at 10% over 10 minutes, or you can do the full shot until it's bubbling out of the cup, and the cup gets hot. One way the cup's easy to handle, the other way it's not. You're trying to mitigate damage to the surrounding tissue, and
True
that's the
enough.
reason for spreading it out over several days.
True enough.
I
Let's,
had another comment on healthcare in general. I'm type 2 diabetic, and now I've got a Dexcom G7 continuous glucose monitor. It looks at my blood sugar every 5 minutes, and it's on the web. My endocrinologist can see it, and it's hard to hide that midnight snack. But so I have routine A1C blood work done every 3 months. And I've got 3 or 4 doctors now. You know, you get into your 70s, and that's your social life. By the way, my sex life's doing fine. I haven't had any problems with it yet, but by the time I see my endocrinologist and my nephrologist, and I've got somebody else, and my favorite is I've got a general internist, and I met him because my wife was a hospice social worker. And he's a hospice doc, but I really like him. You know, he drives a Tesla X. He's my kind of guy, and I guess once I get to that point, I'll already have a hospice doc lined up. But he's the one that refers me to all these people. And I know it's hard to get in to see him. I actually had some toenail problems, and he referred me to a sports podiatrist. This guy's great, so you get free pedicures. But if you have a gateway doctor, and I'm in an area here where we're just thick with hospitals. I'm on East Bay, but you go over into the peninsula, and UCSF and Stanford and all that are fairly readily available. So I don't have any complaints whatsoever. And I think that every 3-month blood test, the full, it's like almost $1,000 worth of testing over at LabCorp, but it's all paid by insurance.
Well, let's talk about that for just a moment here, the insurance. Because every time, especially in October, November, you watch television and you probably have 2 Medicare sign-up ads every commercial break. Who has some tips? Would you go with the Medicare Advantage? Would you go with the PCP? Would you go with straight Medicare and then buy supplemental?
Decide what you want, what's important to you. What was important to me, like I said, I can get you Sue's number. What was important to me was catastrophic coverage, cancer, a heart attack, broken bones. I don't want insurance to buy aspirin and cotton balls. And my plan does not cover my eyeglasses. I had to pay for these out of my pocket. It does not cover my hearing aid. I pay for that out of my pocket.
So are you on
But
Medicare?
when I add up the hearing aid plus eyeglasses plus everything else, it still is what an Advantage plan would have paid towards my surgery. I'm still way ahead.
So Kurt, you're on
But
Medicare,
figure out-
I take it. You're on Medicare?
I have been for several
Okay.
number of years now.
You're on original basic
figure out-
Medicare, not an Advantage plan?
Figure out what's important to you. And that's why I have a supplement. Medicare will pay 80% of whatever Medicare covers. If Medicare covers it, and after my deductible, $2,800 a year, grand total including premiums, after I'm $2,800 out of pocket, my supplement covers everything else. Everything. No copays, no additional deductibles, everything. No matter what it costs, up to several $1,000,000. And it costs me about $400 a year for the plan that I got. It's actually quite cheap compared to what the Advantage salesman will tell you. Figure out what's important to you and do your research.
The Advantage system generally deducts out of your Social Security or your bank account every month, and a lot more than $400.
Yeah, I have an Advantage plan. I'm sorry, I do not have an Advantage plan. I have the supplement, and the wife has it, and it has worked quite nicely. This year, the deductible for medication on Part D $2,000. And in the past, it's been $5,000. Her Eliquis has put us in the, it's terrible.
Catastrophic.
Yeah, that's it. But we go to $2,000 now and in catastrophic. And this prostate thing they gave me, I call it high dollar pills. They are high dollar, and I like to croak whenever I call the pharmacy and he told me how much it cost. But we will take it up to 2,000, and that's all we have to pay, and that'll run for probably 2.5 years on me. But
So really, the story is that you need to look into these things, and it's very simple and easy to sign up for a complete Advantage plan. But financially, that may not be your best solution, or may it be the best solution medically?
no, we have
You mentioned this prescription stuff. I've got a separate Part D plan from the same agent, but it's a separate plan with a separate company. So so far, Cialis costs me $5 a month if I want it, and my other medications are zero, and the plan premium is also zero. One other thing I want to toss in just before we go, I have found it through my research, at least as far as prostate cancer, for the most part, regardless of what treatment a guy chooses, no matter what he chooses, the next 4 or 5 years are clean. It's after 4 to 5 years is when recurrence typically happens, if it's going to happen. Just something to be aware of.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well, we appreciate that these stories have been told, and the tips, and perhaps they'll be helpful to someone, and may save a life at some point here. So we thank you.